Equality and religious liberty are concepts that should support each other.
But they also contradict each other in the United States.
The American Religious Town Hall meeting is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here's your host and moderator, Pastor Jerry Lutz.
Welcome. I'm so glad you've joined us today for tuning in to this edition of the American Religious Town Hall meeting. We're always happy to gather around this table like this and discuss important issues like the one you heard introduced by a couple of our panelists this morning. But I'd like for you to meet the rest of our panel, and for that I'll turn to the gentleman to my right and ask that he tell us a little bit about himself, and then we'll go around the table and learn more about each panelist.
My name is Canon John Peterson. I am an Episcopal priest, and I am canonically resident in the Diocese of Washington.
I'm Rabbi Jordan Offsire, a longtime panelist of the American Religious Town Hall program.
I'm Tom Plumley. I'm the senior minister at First Christian Church in Fort Worth, Texas. Our congregation is a part of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ.
I'm Bert Beach, and I'm an ordained minister of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I live in the Washington, D.C. area.
I'm Mel Robeck, an ordained minister with the Assemblies of God who teaches at Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena, California as senior professor of church history and ecumenics and special assistant to the president for ecumenical relations.
Hi, I'm Carl Trovald, Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at Concordia University in Austin, Texas.
Well, thank you, everyone, for being here this morning. I'm looking forward to this discussion. It is an important one, particularly in light of today's discussion concerning the issues that have been presented, but we want to get a little more deeply into this, so if you're ready, we'll begin. Historically, in the United States, there exists ongoing tensions between the free expression of religion and the full equality of citizens. Religious dogmas and ethics have historically been in contradiction of the fullness and extent of human rights in the U.S. Over the past few decades, the citizens of the United States have engaged in a great struggle to balance civil rights and religious liberty. All of the following issues have been justified in the name of religious freedom: slavery, the forbidding of mixed marriage between races, Jim Crow laws, the sale of certain products to select categories or groups of people, the limitation of women's rights and limits on abortion, just to name a few of the more notables. There are those who believe that government sometimes should infringe on religious freedom in order to pursue equality. But if it does, it should have a compelling reason and should infringe in the least intrusive way possible. Today, we ask our panelists to discuss the inherent tensions of supporting full human equality and equal rights, and a commitment to full religious freedom. Here are three questions I'd like for the panelists to consider today. First, can the apparent tension between religious liberty and equality ever be reduced or perhaps eliminated? And if so, how? Question number two, are there circumstances in which the government should infringe on religious freedom in order to protect equality? And thirdly, and likewise, should claims of equality before the law ever give way to the claims for freedom of religious groups and individuals? That is our subject for today. Let's go back to those who helped to begin the program. Dr. Beach, welcome to the program. Can you say a little more to us about our subject today?
Well, I think religious liberty is very important, but obviously, if you're a very small minority, it becomes a little bit more difficult than if the majority of a nation has the same religious liberty concepts. So it becomes a little bit more difficult. So the larger the group, the easier it is for that group to have its religious liberty recognized. But I think we should also be understanding as religious people that my religious liberty is for me, yes, okay, but it soon may interfere with the human rights of other people. And therefore, I have to adjust to be able to accept their rights and my rights. And we have to find a modus vivendi in which we respect each other. We can't just say, well, I have the viewpoint that my child should not have any medicine or any treatment and let's let it die because God will intervene somehow. Well, that the society has the duty to prepare, to help and protect children. That's the duty of society, and therefore the society will interrupt and intervect, and I think they have the right to do that. I could go on.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Next to you is Dr. Trovol. You also helped to start the program today. Continued thoughts on your opening statement, please.
Sure. Both religions and governments are fallen institutions. I mean, they sustain people, but they also have generally systemic problems within themselves on an ongoing basis because they're made up of those of us who are fallen creatures. And as a result, interestingly enough, sometimes religion can be a prophetic voice to government and the social space and society. But I also find that in the United States, sometimes it becomes religiously inspired visions of equality that then go back and turn back on religions and challenge them, are you really holding up to the standards of equality that you claim that you're holding to? And I think, you know, the moderator's statement, I mean, Bert here mentioned also a couple of these where these are in tremendous tension. I mean, I'm thinking of, you know, in particular, let's talk about women's leadership. There are certain churches that don't allow women to hold certain roles, namely to be pastors or bishops. And then you have to ask the question, in an egalitarian society like the United States, what happens when a case of a church arises to the level of the Supreme Court or another situation? You have this tension between the values of the religion. And we've seen religions justify what we now believe immoral acts under the guise freedom of religion. Well, this is what we do in our religion, so you need to stay out. We could talk about well, this is what we talk about on this show, all these unique situations. And I don't know, I just think that there's a fundamental contradiction. They're always going to be in tension, and the resolution is going to be based on the social context we live in and an ongoing change of society as people within religions change their mores and try to be consistent with their values.
So there's really no solution, you're saying, to the tension?
No.
And should there be?
No. It's probably good that there isn't.
No ultimate solution.
There's no ultimate solution.
All right, thank you.
It's a trajectory toward eternity, you know. It's,
Whatever.
Thank you. Across the table, Reverend Plumley, your comments, please.
Yeah, I was hoping you'd come to me later, but because no, that's all right. That's all right.
Okay.
Let me throw something out there and see if it sticks, or see what it sticks to. I think I would be willing to make the claim that the free exercise clause of the First Amendment has seldom been allowed to trump the establishment clause of the First Amendment. The converse, however, has often been the case. The establishment clause, the courts have been unwilling to establish one particular religious understanding in the light of in the hope of doing away with other or impinging upon other freedoms and rights of other people. Which is to answer your second question.
Yes.
Okay. You ask, are there circumstances in which the government should infringe on religious freedom in order to protect equality? And I would say to protect equality and to avoid breaching the Establishment Clause. Okay? In other words, to avoid establishing that one person's or that small group's understanding of what it means to freely exercise their religion can, in some cases, if they were to decide the other way, establish that particular religious point of view as the prescribed point of view.
Delicate balance there.
Yeah.
Tightrope walking. All right, across the table, Rabbi Ofsire, welcome to the program. Your thoughts on the subject, please.
I'm still trying to understand what Tom has just said.
No, okay.
And really my response is an oblique one. There are all kinds of beliefs that have come down to us through religious traditions of different kinds. And when those impinge upon the more recently established laws that are concerned for all of the citizens, there needs to be, almost by definition, a clash between them. And I would imagine that the most reasonable response is that they need to be determined on a case basis rather than trying to establish a law that can reflect helpfully on all of the religious perspectives that exist in our diverse society.
So one size does not fit all.
One size cannot fit all.
And on the merits of each case to be decided. Do you think the framers had that in mind? I mean, when they were drafting these documents and thinking these grand thoughts?
Some of them did and some
Some
of them
did
didn't.
not. Dr. Robeck, welcome to the program. Your
Thank
thoughts
you.
on the subject, please.
Well, this is a complicated issue. I mean, I don't see any easy way out of this. I mean, I think that Carl was correct in noting that, you know, we live in a sinful world, and all of our programs, including our churches and including our courts, are sinful realities. And I think as a result of that we have, I think
say imperfect realities rather than sinful.
Well, you can. I don't know whether you're right, but they certainly are all imperfect. But I do think that we sin. I want to say, you know, when the church implemented the Crusades, for instance, I really think that was a sin. It was not just a violation of other people; it was a sin. I would also say the same thing about their support of slavery for so many hundreds of years. I mean, it just, you know, those are sins, and I don't want to soften that. But I would also say that courts are supposed to be neutral arbiters, and I think that's what was intended, but they're also interpreters. And unfortunately, in recent years, we've seen the politicization of so much of our court system, and I find it very difficult to trust anymore the neutrality or the ability of the court to finesse on behalf of the common good what is right and what is wrong. I find them, in a sense, redefining certain realities that I find very difficult. For instance, in my circumstance, in the Assemblies of God, I would say what they have done is they've redefined natural law in defining the third gender, or perhaps even in ending or not ending pregnancies, so forth. I mean, I think that is one of the problems. It's not the only one by any stretch, and I don't want to simply lift that up as the issue. But I don't think the founders of our democratic republic had in mind exactly where the Constitution would take us and how laws would be implemented or not implemented. I think one more thing that's probably significant is the fact that what we think of as human rights today have not always been human rights. In other words, the number of human rights and the names that we give to them are different today, and they will be different tomorrow. Is clean air a human right? Is clean water a human right?
Human necessities.
They're necessities, no question about it. I want to say they're human rights. But, I'm in a minority situation, I suppose, to argue those kinds of cases. So I think we have to be really careful here about where religion crosses the line and hurts people, and where the courts cross the line and hurt the religious freedom.
So the definition of equality has changed as well.
I think
of
so,
course,
by
through
all
the
means.
years.
I mean, if you think about the Constitution in the beginning, it was for white property-owning men, free men, not slaves.
Protestants too, might as well.
Yeah,
add that.
Protestants. You might as well add that too. Yeah, you're
All
right.
Thank you. Canon Peterson, welcome to the program. Your thoughts and perspectives, please.
Yes, well, I certainly want to underline and thank Mel for what he has contributed to this. Two things. The Constitution only really mentions religion on two different occasions. No religion test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust under the United States. And the second is, Congress shall make no laws respecting the establishment of religion or the free exercise of religion thereof. We have to note that there is no mention of equality in those two provisions. And there are tensions here, and exactly the tensions that have been discussed around the table. James Madison is the one who really acknowledged sometime later that among the features peculiar to the political system in the United States is the perfect equality of rights which it secures to every religious sect. Now, I want to say that around this table, there are many different positions on this subject and even on this panel. Some of us would argue more on the side of religious liberty being the end all, while there is others who would want to argue for equality. I would be one who would want to argue for equality. The discrimination between Muslims, Jews, and other non-Christian religions, for me, is absolutely anathema. That blacks, browns, and other colors are not able to enjoy the same equality as white men is anathema. That women do not have the same rights and equal pay, which certainly would never have been considered at the framing of the Constitution. Same pay for doing the same job is anathema. And it seems to me that we are in a situation of cultural as well as historical understanding in relationship to what the Constitution is. How does this fluid document, the Constitution, be interpreted today in contrast to 200 years ago?
To worship freely and to be treated as an equal.
Yes.
The ideal.
And what
the
does,
ideal.
And that's why, you know, the ideal concept of the cliffhanger is correct. That these two concepts should sustain and protect each other, but so frequently they do not.
Thank you, Rabbi, yes.
I want to protect the viewers. I would like us to reach some kind of clarifying principles that can be helpful for those who are watching the program this time, rather than scratching their heads and asking themselves, what are they all talking about? So may we try to do that.
So, yes, there's the challenge, Reverend Plumley. I think it's coming through, but Reverend Plumley.
Yes. Let me try to explain what I said before and also answer that question. Slavery was a sincerely held religious belief of lots of people for lots of centuries, including a lot of Americans. As our president would say, there were good people in that group. That sincerely held religious belief was, for a while, the established religion of this nation. It was the established religious opinion that held sway for a while, okay? And folks were freely able to exercise that opinion. We changed. We decided that religious opinion was wrong for a lot of different reasons. And we fought a war that made it clear about the intensity at which we were not going to accept that religious thought anymore.
And
nor would we allow it to be
exercised. And all of us around this table believe that.
Correct.
Mr. or Mrs. Viewer, you need to know that. We, each of us, believe that with respect to slavery.
All right, Dr. Trovall, further comments on the subject, please.
Well, I love the illustration because it just starkly points out precisely what we're talking about. Because, okay, let's shift it to marriage equality. Right? I mean, I know the New Testament had no problem with slavery. I mean, it was. I mean, Christians were slaves and they weren't, and it was justified, and so And so you have, clearly you're, in one sense, by, how can I put this?
More clearly.
Well, what I'm saying is that with marriage equality, clearly there are people who are opposed to it on religious grounds. And yet society has said this is actually a right that people have to marry whom they choose, whatever sex they are, gender they are. And so now we have a conflict between people who have a fundamental religious belief about marriage and people who have a belief about marriage that actually they even believe it comes out of religious belief. And so you have a contradiction even of a religious belief.
I'm sorry, we're out of time. It went quickly, I know. And there's a summation coming, so think about what you want to say for your summary. You'll have that time to be able to make your final comments. For now, we'd like for you to stand by and listen to this important message. We'll be back in a moment.
Thank you, Pastor Lutz. We hope you are enjoying today's program. If you would like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the mission and history of the program, learn about the Town Hall estates, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, Pastor Lutz looks forward to receiving your letters. You may write to him at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. That's Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. Thank you for writing, and thank you for watching. And now, back to you, Pastor Lutz, and today's closing statements.
Thank you. Welcome back. I do look forward to hearing from you. Some of our best programs have been as a result of your sending in suggestions about topics that we've discussed here around the table. So thank you for the cards, the letters, for the emails. Also, if you'd go to the website, you can find out more about the Town Hall Estates and about the program. The program's history is interesting, as I'm sure you'll be wanting to check in on soon. For now, we're going to go to our summations, and I'd like to turn to our first, Kenneth Peterson, you're first in line for summations.
Thank you. I think that one thing has certainly come out of this discussion today is how culturally sensitive we are to equality and the different generations. And I suspect you're right, Carl. You know, in 100 years from now, this hot topic of marriage equality will not be seen as being in such tension as we face now. A couple of weeks ago, we heard the words from Martin Luther King and his last sermon that he preached before his assassination. I think it applies to us with this subject as well. We must all learn to live together as brothers and sisters, or we will all perish together as fools.
Thank you very much. Next to you then, Reverend Plumley, your summation, please.
Yeah, I simply think that this is one of those areas in which there will continually be tension, and of right ought to be tension. And there will be a regular balancing. That is the job of our judiciary, and we pray God's guidance upon them.
All right, thank you. Dr. Robeck, your summary, please.
Yeah, I really struggle with this particular program, I suppose, because I have a much higher view of what the church is capable of doing than what our legal realities are around us. And I think it's really important for us to remind ourselves that religious teaching is not simply a matter of personal opinion, nor is it the matter of collective opinions through the centuries. God's involved in some ways, and all you have to do is think about the Ten Commandments, for instance, which are timeless. Yet we don't take many of those very seriously, except for perhaps murder. Then I think we do. And I do think that not only the Ten Commandments, but the Great Commandment, which is to love God and to love your neighbor. And I think that the church will work toward equality for everybody. But equality defined simply by the law doesn't necessarily take seriously what the church thinks or what God even thinks about equality. I'm a white male born in a free country and I have access to education and everything else, but there are a lot of people who will never be equal to me, and that isn't our fault. It's not my fault, I should say.
Thank you. Dr. Trovall.
Insofar as government's challenge churches and religious, or any religious community, to be honest with itself about what its morals are and its ethics are, about its highest values. Insofar as governments challenge religious communities to do that, I think that's healthy. It needs to happen. And I also think it's healthy that we continue to reserve that space of religious expression and freedom to do exactly the opposite. Governments are notoriously utilitarian, that the bottom line is the bottom line, and run roughshod over people frequently in the interest of getting its way. And religious communities are precisely there to hold back that as well. So both are important, and they will remain in tension.
Thank you. Dr. Beach, your summation.
Well, I agreed with what my colleagues here have said. I think we need a continued discussion regarding liberty and equality. There's a constant conversation needs to take place, because liberty, equality doesn't mean sameness exactly. It has to be interpreted, and has to be reinterpreted, because society changes. You come into a country where everybody's doing something, and then comes a new concept, and they can't understand how that could exist. But then you tell them in that other country it functions very well, and then they find that if a Seventh-day Adventist doesn't go to school on Saturday, he still can function and finish school and succeed. But you have to interpret that, and you have to show it and negotiate, not just say down, no, we're not going to do it.
Thank you, Dr. Beach. Now, Rabbi Ofsire.
I believe that we are all created equal, men and women, male and female, and we are created with the possibility of becoming godlike or its opposite. And we struggle with all of this and have continued to struggle over the ages, as we can see and hear with the program today. My hope is that we live in a way that our religious traditions teach us to do, the best of the religious traditions, that they are influencing the decisions that we make each day.
All right, thank you very much. We're out of time for today's program. The Charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestants, Jews, educators, and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy. And the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America we believe in civil and religious freedom, not only in theory, but in reality. And now, friends, until next week at the same time and over the very same channel, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. And may the God of all of us bless all of you.